Back in February, we did a video where I stated that I felt like things were starting to change with the Disney company in a positive direction, that change was in the air. We've all seen that Disney's been struggling for the past few years now, trying to overcome a wide range of problems. A lot of them self-inflicted, some a product of the Chapek era, while others are simply a result of growing fatigue by guests and fans with the Disney company. But in the month since I made that video, change has already started to arrive, both in the executive offices and in the parks. Things are starting to look even more positive. Keeping our eyes open, I'm watching. Change is in the air. Things are going to be happening here. And some of it could be having to do with pelts and the proxy war that's going on right now. They're still in the middle of that vote. That's going to be a little while before all those votes come in and figure where we stand with the board of directors. But even if Peltz doesn't win that proxy war and get his seat on the board, even if that doesn't happen, we're still going to be seeing side effects, aftershocks of this battle. That was from February 20th, and I arrived at that feeling based on things that I was hearing, changes that were happening in the Disney offices. The company was turning the corner on how they operate, that they were beginning to change course. There were changes being made in management, new and current methods and voices were being dismissed, and sourcing previous leadership in the hopes, obviously, to return to an era that was more successful. That was the message that I was getting back in February, and since then, one of the key hires of the Chapek era, Barbara Buza, I'm sure you guys may have heard, has left the company. She was the president of Imagineering. She was hired by Chapek in 2020 and then was promoted to president in 2021 when current president of Imagineering, Bob Weiss, retired. The announcement itself came from Buza, and it did sound like a resignation, in her words, rather than a termination. But the move certainly does reconcile with the idea that Disney was looking to return to its pre-COVID, its pre-Chapek operations. Recall, we had a conversation about Bruce Vaughn about a year ago. He had been brought back, rehired into a position of prominence in Imagineering. He left the Disney company back in 2016, right as Chapek was ascending. Same for Tom Staggs, by the way, who also recently has been brought back into the fold a little bit. Now, Vaughn was a leading figure in the development of Pandora. That's the Avatar-themed land at Animal Kingdom. And that was a project led by Joe Rohde, of course, to whom we'll be returning in just a bit because he's also in the news. But with Buza out, Bruce Vaughn has ascended to lead Imagineering. He's now the new president of Imagineering. And one gets the sense that it's a signal that Disney wants to return to how things used to be done. This is made especially more apparent when you consider the words used by Buza herself on her way out of Imagineering. She said that she was recruited by Disney to, quote, challenge the norm and bring broader global industry perspective and expertise. And the key word for me in that statement is global, as in not Disney. We all know that Disney has a certain way of designing. Global is a broader, more generic, I think, term to appeal to a broader, more generic audience, perhaps. And as she says, she was brought in with that directive. That's a Chapek directive. And Disney has hit the delete button on that directive. About a week later, news breaks that Disney had filed permits to install new construction trailers in the backstage areas at Animal Kingdom. And the permits are detailed in such a way as to suggest that it's something that is consistent with larger, long-term projects. One of the primary complaints that fans have had with the Disney company is their lack of action. They've been all talk, all blue sky, and no action.
What exactly is Beyond Big Thunder?
While Universal is putting shovels in the ground at an alarming rate. They've got projects going on all over the globe. While Disney was doing nothing more than thinking about things that they could be doing. Blue sky, no shovels. And the complaints seem to be justified because that is exactly what's been happening now for the past few years or so. Now, one of those blue sky sessions was for Animal Kingdom, turning Dino Land into an Encanto and Indiana Jones themed land. Dinorama becomes an Encanto attraction and Dinosaur becomes Indiana Jones Adventure, while the rest of the land gets all new theming and design. Now, while interesting and possibly even a popular move. I think that this would be a popular move. It was received by kind of a yawn by guests, by fans, because it was, once more, just more talk and not a lot of action. More blue sky, more, again, maybe we'll do this someday. We're thinking about it. And while Disney still has not confirmed, there has been no confirmation from Disney that is what they're doing, these permits do suggest that they have made up their mind and they are about to start doing something at Animal Kingdom, something big, and probably the Indiana Jones and Encanto updates. A project now being led, by the way, by Bruce Vaughn. Again, one of the key figures in the development of Pandora, the Avatar-themed land. It's right across the street from Dino Land, just down the way. Which brings us to, because I know what you're thinking, it brings us to just a few days ago when we got a new announcement from Walt Disney Imagineering. They announced that they're bringing Joe Rohde back. Not as a rehire per se, he's not going to be a Disney Imagineer again, but to lead a masterclass workshop teaching new Disney Imagineers. And I would be willing to bet that it's not to teach these new Imagineers the new modern global way of doing things as we're being instructed by Barbara Buza, but in how things used to be done by Imagineers such as Joe Rohde and Bruce Vaughn. Is this a coincidence that this is all happening just as they're about to seemingly begin a major project in Animal Kingdom? I mean, maybe, though I expect that if Disney is getting ready to do something there in Animal Kingdom, then the designs and the specs have already been completed. This thing has been figured out. They've already imagined what it's going to look like. Now they need to get into the actual building of it. Though, I will also add that it's going to take a while for them to demo all that space back there in Dino Land. It takes a long time to do all that. A long time before they start putting shovels in the ground. So there is still time for Disney to amend what plans that they had come up with up until now. In any case, what's really important about this isn't necessarily Animal Kingdom per se, although that's a good deal, that's a big deal. What's more important is the message that bringing Joe Rohde back in any capacity, what that message means. The desire to teach new Imagineers in a way that used to be done by the likes of Joe Rohde, by someone who is well respected by Disney fans. His name has a lot of cachet with those of us who follow that kind of thing, and who also has a respect for the design process itself. He takes it very seriously. He's very thorough. He is a great Imagineer. Why is that necessary? Why do they need to bring back Joe Rohde in order to teach a masterclass on Imagineering? Well, I think it's pretty much, you can nail it down to the Lake Nona project. That was one of the biggest disasters of the Chapek era. It doesn't get as much recognition as some other stories might, but right in the middle of COVID, Disney says, you know what, we're going to build this enormous campus for Imagineers in Florida, and we're going to move the entire Imagineering department to Florida. And that means the Imagineers here in Southern California as well, of which there were many. This was a great source, Southern California was, for Imagineering talent. And they said, we're going to move the whole thing to Florida, and they told the Imagineers working here in Southern California, you can either move to Florida and keep your jobs there, or you can quit. And a lot of them made their choice. They lost a lot of Imagineering talent then. There was a huge purge. And this is in spite of the fact that they hadn't even started building this site yet. And they lost those Imagineers because they were forced to make a decision. And with those lost Imagineers was also decades worth of institutional knowledge. And I'm sure you could rehire new Imagineers. Certainly those new Imagineers could be very talented, very smart, imaginative, creative artisans. But it's the loss of that institutional knowledge that hurts the most. Having veterans on staff in the Imagineering department helps to pass along generations worth of generations worth of how Disney builds theme parks. And obviously that's important because Disney is known for being the leader in these departments, in these areas, known for being ahead of everybody else. There's a certain way that Disney does it that others don't. And having veteran Imagineers on staff shortens the time span that it takes to teach new Imagineers as they come in. It shortens that learning curve. It makes the whole process it facilitates the creative process, having veteran leadership there. to bring it. So bringing back Joe Rohde is a huge win, even if it's just as a teacher. I mean, that's great for me, in my opinion. I don't necessarily need Joe Rohde to design the new Indiana Jones adventure in Encanto Land or whatever they do there at Animal Kingdom. I don't necessarily need Joe Rohde to be that guy because he can't build stuff forever. But what I do need is for people like Joe Rohde to teach the younger people who come up how to do it the Disney way, in a way that so you could keep that process moving for generations. By the way, Joe Rohde, he left back in 2020. He was part of the Chapek era exodus. This is prior to Lake Nona. He left because Chapek wanted to change Imagineering. And bringing him back now tells me, it's a very bright and clear message. It tells me that Disney wants to return to that mode of thinking, that way of designing, the method of Imagineering. So this is all very good news for Disney guests, for Disney Parks fans. And one thing I can add is actually, these are only the visible changes that have been made, the ones that have made headlines, that have made news. There are other changes happening that won't make news. Changes in leadership in operations, for example. New hires with new methods are being retired, and former cast members are being recruited, rehired. But it'll take some time before we can see the effects of those changes, because it's not overt. These are not guest-facing changes, but they're going to be changes nonetheless, and it'll make the parks operate better. But I can say, and I'm hoping, that some of those changes include 3 areas that we will notice, 3 areas that have definitely become headlines: the park reservations, Genie Plus, and Magic Key sales. We're still waiting for changes on the reservation system, and we're still waiting for changes on Genie Plus. But it does seem obvious that Disneyland especially, has changed their attitude about Magic Keys. Here's something I saw for the first time ever when walking into the park on Tuesday. A literal sign suggesting that Disneyland was back in the Magic Key business for good. Well, for the near future at least. Perhaps at least until this winter. Up until recently, you simply could not buy a Magic Key. They stopped selling them completely, and then they would open them up for a day or two, and then they close them up again right away. And that was the case for a good 18 months or so. But most recently, I think it was on March 5th, Disney reopened sales for Magic Keys, and as of this day, they are still available. 22 days later, a minor miracle, in my opinion. I had personally been waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for the news to say, okay, that's enough, we've sold them, Magic Key sales are closed. But instead of getting that, instead of getting news that they're going to stop selling them, we're getting a sign that says, not only are we not going to stop selling them, we are going to actively encourage you to buy them. We're going to actively encourage you to upgrade your single day or multi-day ticket to an annual pass. To be honest, I didn't think I would ever see that day again. But there is still a chance that this is temporary. I do want to hedge my bet on that just a little bit. My guess is that renewals have slowed down in the past year or so. They're not getting renewals at the same rate that they might have expected. And not just because guests are frustrated by the Disney company and by Disney parks. We've seen that there is still lots of demand, as we've been seeing packed crowds during the winter. But this, we felt, was due to the discounted ticket for kids, the $50 ticket. But demand is still really high, but only under the right conditions. But conditions are worsened right now by the extended closures of Haunted Mansion, Splash Mountain, and eventually all of Critter Country. And I would guess that it's difficult to sell a ticket at full price under those conditions. So I'm prepared for this new Magic Key sales push to continue up until that time that those attractions reopen in 5 or 6 months. And it's possible come winter that they might stop selling Magic Keys again. I'm hoping that's not the case, but I'm open for that. But I'm also open for the idea that they have, in fact, changed their opinion, because it does reconcile with the idea that they want to go back to 2019 conditions when passes were sold freely. Matter of fact, they were creating new passes to sell, the Flex Pass. Do you guys remember that? I can see a future where that's the case. Of course, in 2019, we didn't have the reservation system, nor did we have paid Fast Pass. And if Disney truly does desire to return to that era, to to pre-COVID era, to 2019, or even before that, that's how this story ends. It ends with Chapek out, with Joe Rohde back in Imagineering, with Bruce Vaughn leading Imagineering. Hey, bring back Tony Baxter while you're at it. With Magic Key sales happening again, and also with eliminating the reservation system and eliminating GD Plus, or coming up with some other alternative that is more guest-friendly and not elitist like Genie Plus is. Give us a free option like we had back in the day, for example, with FastPass. For now, we're just left to watch and see what happens, but there's more to come. I'm sure of that. Change was in the air in February. We've already seen it starting to happen in just the 1 month since then. What more can we see in the next year or 2 years? I was optimistic before. I've never been more optimistic as I am now. So stay tuned to FreshBaked. And if you like this show and want to show your support, please do consider joining our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/freshbaked. You can follow us on Instagram at _freshbaked and on TikTok at FreshBakedDisney. Otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody. We love you. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. FreshBaked.